The train screeched to a halt at the Aurora, Colorado station on a scorching afternoon in July 1882, and Victoria Jane Hartwell stepped onto the platform with her carpetbag clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Knowing that somewhere in this crowd of dusty cowboys and weathered miners stood the man she had agreed to marry through nothing more than letters and a leap of desperate faith. She scanned the faces, her heart hammering against her ribs, lips pressed firmly together in a habit that had become second nature over the past 15 years. Ever since she was 8 years old and the other children had mocked her mercilessly for the way her tongue seemed to tangle around certain sounds, Victoria had learned that silence was safer than speech. The lisp that turned her words into a source of ridicule had driven her deeper and deeper into herself, until she had perfected the art of communicating through nods, gestures, and the occasional carefully written note. The advertisement in the Boston newspaper had seemed like providence. A rancher in Colorado seeking a wife, someone gentle and hardworking, someone who did not mind the isolation of frontier life. Victoria had written to Nathan Cordell with trembling hands, crafting each sentence with painstaking care, her penmanship flawless and elegant. In letters, she could be anyone. In letters, no one could hear the way she struggled with S sounds, the way her tongue betrayed her with every sibilant syllable. Nathan had written back with surprising eloquence for a cattleman. His letters spoke of wide open spaces, of mountains that touched the sky, of a life that was hard but honest. He had lost his parents to cholera 3 years prior and had been managing the ranch alone ever since. He was 26 years old, he wrote, and ready to build a family, to share his life with someone who wanted more than the crowded streets and factory smoke of the East. Victoria was 23, and she had spent the last 5 years working in a textile mill, living in a cramped boarding house, watching her youth slip away in the repetitive clatter of looms and the gray sameness of each day. When Nathan had sent money for her passage and asked her to come to Colorado as his bride, she had packed her few belongings without hesitation. Now, standing on the platform with dust swirling around her dark blue traveling dress, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. A man emerged from the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His eyes were a startling shade of green, and they locked onto her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He held a piece of paper in his hand, and she recognized her own handwriting on it, the description she had sent of herself. Brown hair, blue eyes, 5 feet 4 inches tall, a small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall. "Miss Hartwell?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her chest. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair, and offered her a smile that transformed his rather stern features into something warmer. "I'm Nathan Cordell. I hope your journey was not too difficult." Victoria shook her head, then realized she should probably say something. She had prepared a few words, practiced them in her mind during the long train ride, but now that the moment was here, her throat closed up with familiar panic. Nathan seemed to sense her discomfort. "You must be exhausted," he said kindly, reaching for her carpetbag. "Let me take that. My wagon is just over here. We have about an hour's ride to the ranch, but I brought cushions for the seat, and I have a canteen of cool water if you are thirsty." She nodded again, grateful for his consideration, and followed him to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient-looking horses. He helped her up onto the seat with a gentleness that surprised her, given the size and obvious strength of his hands, and then climbed up beside her. As they rolled out of town, Victoria kept her gaze fixed on the landscape unfolding before them. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. The sky was a blue so vast and deep it made her feel tiny and infinite all at once. Wildflowers dotted the grasslands in splashes of yellow and purple, and the air smelled of sage and pine and something else she could not name, something wild and clean. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Nathan said, following her gaze. "I never tire of it. Every morning when I step out of the house, I feel like I am seeing it for the first time." Victoria nodded, her eyes drinking in the view. She wanted to tell him that it was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined, that already she felt something loosening in her chest, some knot of tension she had been carrying for years. But the words stayed locked inside her. Nathan did not seem to mind. He pointed out landmarks as they traveled, naming the distant peaks, showing her where his property line began, marked by a split-rail fence that stretched as far as she could see. "I have about 500 acres," he explained. "It is not the biggest spread in the territory, but it is mine, free and clear. I run about 200 head of cattle, mostly Herefords, good stock, and I have a small herd of horses that I breed and train. That is really what I love most, working with the horses." She listened to the pride in his voice, the way he spoke about the land and the animals with such obvious affection, and she found herself relaxing slightly. This was not the gruff, taciturn man she had half expected. Nathan Cordell had a warmth to him, an openness that invited trust. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, and Victoria felt her heart lift at the sight of it. It was a solid 2-story structure of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Not grand by any means, but well built and welcoming, with lace curtains visible in the windows and flower boxes that held bright red geraniums. "My mother planted those," Nathan said, noticing her gaze. "The geraniums. I have tried to keep them going, though I admit I am not much of a gardener. I am hoping you might have a better touch with them." Victoria smiled, the first real smile since she had left Boston, and nodded. She could tend flowers. That was something she could do without words. Nathan helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag to the house. The interior was clean and surprisingly neat for a bachelor's home. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace on one wall and a sturdy wooden table that could seat 6. The furniture was simple but well made, and everywhere she looked she saw small touches that spoke of care. A colorful woven rug on the floor, books lined up on a shelf, curtains that matched the ones she had seen from outside. "I have prepared the bedroom upstairs for you," Nathan said, and there was a slight hesitation in his voice now, a hint of awkwardness. "I thought, that is, I assumed you might want some time to settle in before the wedding. The circuit preacher comes through Aurora once a month. He will be back next Saturday, if that suits you. In the meantime, I will sleep in the bunkhouse with my men." Victoria looked at him in surprise. She had expected that they would marry immediately, that he would expect his rights as her husband right away. The fact that he was offering her time, offering her a choice, made something warm bloom in her chest. She reached out and touched his hand lightly, then nodded her agreement. Nathan's shoulders relaxed and his smile returned. "Good. That is good. Well then, let me show you the rest of the house, and then I will bring in some fresh water so you can wash up. We usually eat supper around 7, but tonight I thought we might eat a bit earlier, give you time to rest. I am not much of a cook, I warn you, but I can manage a decent stew." The tour was brief. Besides the main room, there was a small pantry stocked with flour, beans, preserved vegetables, and various other supplies, and a back room that Nathan used as an office, with a desk covered in papers and ledgers. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms. The largest had clearly been his parents', and that was the one he had prepared for her. The bed was covered with a beautiful quilt in shades of blue and cream, and there was a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, a wardrobe, and a rocking chair by the window. "Take your time," Nathan said, setting down her carpet bag. "I will be downstairs if you need anything." After he left, Victoria sank onto the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. The enormity of what she had done was beginning to settle over her. She was in Colorado, 1,000 miles from everything she had ever known, about to marry a stranger. A kind stranger, to be sure, but a stranger nonetheless. And at some point she was going to have to speak to him. She could not maintain her silence forever, not if they were to be husband and wife. But not yet. Not today. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 other dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her hairbrush and hand mirror on the washstand. When Nathan called up that he had brought the water, she washed the train dust from her face and hands, changed into a fresh dress, and made her way back downstairs. Nathan was at the stove, stirring a pot that smelled of beef and vegetables. He had removed his hat and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and tanned from long hours in the sun. He glanced over as she entered and gestured to the table. "Please sit. It is almost ready." She sat, folding her hands in her lap, and watched him work. He moved with an easy confidence, clearly comfortable in the kitchen despite his claims of limited cooking skill. When he ladled the stew into bowls and brought them to the table along with thick slices of bread, it looked and smelled delicious. "I hope it is all right," he said, sitting across from her. "Like I said, I am no expert, but a man learns to fend for himself out here." Victoria picked up her spoon and tasted the stew. It was good, hearty and flavorful, and she nodded her approval. Nathan seemed pleased. "I am glad. I was worried you might be used to fancier fare, coming from the city." She shook her head and took another spoonful, hoping her actions conveyed that she was more than satisfied. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and then Nathan set down his spoon and leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating green eyes. "You are very quiet," he said gently. "I know you must be tired and probably overwhelmed by all of this. I cannot imagine how strange it must be, coming to a new place, preparing to marry someone you have never met. But I want you to know that I meant everything I wrote in my letters. I am looking for a partner, Victoria, someone to share this life with. I know it will not be easy, and I know we have a lot to learn about each other, but I hope we can be friends as well as husband and wife." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. She nodded, wishing desperately that she could tell him how much his words meant to her, how grateful she was for his kindness. Instead, she reached across the table and placed her hand over his, squeezing gently. Nathan turned his hand over, clasping hers, and smiled. "We will make this work," he said. "I believe that." Over the next few days, Victoria settled into the rhythm of the ranch. She rose early, as she had always done, and set about making herself useful. She cooked breakfast for Nathan and his 2 ranch hands, a grizzled older man named Pete and a cheerful young cowboy named Tom. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, discovering that Nathan's neatness masked a layer of dust and neglect that came from a man too busy with outdoor work to notice such things. She tended the garden, pulling weeds and watering the vegetables and herbs that Nathan's mother had planted years before. Nathan worked from dawn to dusk, moving cattle, mending fences, breaking a new horse to saddle. But every evening, he made a point of coming back to the house to eat supper with Victoria, and every evening he tried to draw her into conversation. At first, his attempts were gentle and undemanding. He would tell her about his day, describing the work he had done, the problems he had solved, the small victories and frustrations of ranch life. He did not seem to expect her to respond beyond an occasional nod or smile, and Victoria was grateful for that. But as the days passed and Saturday drew closer, Nathan's questions became more direct. "Tell me about Boston," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. "What was it like, living there?" Victoria tensed, her fingers tightening on the arms of her rocking chair. She could feel his eyes on her, patient and curious, waiting for an answer. She shook her head slightly, not quite a refusal but not an agreement either. "Did you have family there?" he pressed gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "Are they still there?" Another nod. "You miss them?" Victoria considered the question. Did she miss her older brother, who had barely noticed her existence once he married and started his own family? Did she miss the boarding house matron who had looked at her with pity whenever Victoria had to resort to writing notes to communicate? Did she miss the mill girls who had whispered behind her back about the strange woman who never spoke? She shook her head. Nathan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, there was a new note in his voice, something thoughtful and careful. "You do not talk much, do you? I mean, at all. In all the days you have been here, I do not think I have heard you say a single word." Victoria's heart began to race. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. She could feel the familiar panic rising in her throat, the certainty that if she tried to speak, the words would come out wrong, twisted, and ugly, and Nathan would look at her with the same disgust and amusement she had seen on so many faces before. "Victoria," Nathan said softly, and she forced herself to look at him. His expression was concerned but not unkind. "Can you speak? I mean, is there a physical reason why you do not talk? Because if there is, I want you to know that it does not matter to me. I am not marrying you for conversation. I am marrying you because I believe we can build a good life together." She wanted to laugh at the irony. She could speak, technically. Her vocal cords worked just fine. It was just that every time she opened her mouth, her own voice betrayed her, turned her into an object of mockery. Slowly, carefully, she nodded to indicate that, yes, she could speak. Nathan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze never leaving her face. "Then why do you not? What are you afraid of?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. They had teased her, ignored her, pitied her, but no one had ever simply asked her why. Victoria stood abruptly, too agitated to sit still, and walked to the edge of the porch. The sun had nearly disappeared now, leaving streaks of orange and pink across the sky. She could feel Nathan's presence behind her, could sense him waiting for an answer she did not know how to give. "Victoria," he said again, and there was such gentleness in the way he said her name that something inside her cracked. She turned to face him, and before she could stop herself, before she could think better of it, she opened her mouth and spoke. "I have a lisp." The word came out exactly as she had known it would, the S sound soft and slurred, her tongue getting in the way. She felt her face flame with humiliation and immediately pressed her lips together, her eyes dropping to the floor. The silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever. Victoria waited for the laughter, the awkward clearing of the throat, the barely concealed amusement. She had heard it all before, but when Nathan finally spoke, his voice held only understanding. "Is that all?" Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. Nathan stood and walked over to her, stopping just a few feet away. "Victoria, is that why you have been so quiet?" "Because you have a lisp," she nodded miserably, feeling tears threaten again. "And people have made fun of you for it," he said. It was not a question. Another nod. Nathan shook his head slowly, and there was anger in his eyes now, but it was not directed at her. "People can be cruel about the strangest things. My brother had a stutter when we were young. Other kids used to mock him mercilessly for it. It nearly broke his spirit. He paused, and his expression softened. He died when he was 12, along with my parents. Cholera epidemic. But before that, he learned to live with it, to not let it define him. I wish you could have met him. He would have liked you. Victoria felt the tears spill over now, running hot down her cheeks. She wiped at them roughly, embarrassed by her own emotion. "Hey," Nathan said, closing the distance between them and gently taking her hands in his. "Listen to me. I do not care about a Lisp. I care about who you are as a person. I care about the fact that you have brought life back to this house, that you tend my mother's flowers like they are precious treasures, that you cook breakfast for my ranch hands without me even asking. I care about the way you smile when you think no one is looking and the way you hum while you work." "I hum?" Victoria asked, startled into speech again. "You do," Nathan said, and now he was smiling. "Little tunes, like you do not even realize you are doing it. It is one of my favorite sounds." Victoria stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You really do not mind?" The words came out hesitantly, the lisp evident but not as pronounced as she had feared. "I really do not mind," Nathan assured her. "In fact, I would very much like to hear your voice more often. I want to know what you think, what you feel, what you dream about. I want to have real conversations with you, Victoria. I want to know my wife." "Your wife," she repeated softly, and the word felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. "After Saturday, yes," Nathan said. "If you still want that. I know I am not much to look at and this life is hard, but I promise I will do everything in my power to make you happy." Victoria shook her head vehemently. "You are very handsome," she said, and then blushed at her own boldness. Nathan laughed, a rich, warm sound that made her heart flutter. "Handsome, am I? Well, I think you are beautiful, lisp and all, especially when you are willing to talk to me." That night, as Victoria lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she felt a cautious hope beginning to take root. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could be herself, where her voice, imperfect as it was, would be welcome. The wedding took place on Saturday afternoon in the small church in Aurora. The circuit preacher, a jovial man named Reverend Matthews, performed the ceremony with Pete and Tom as witnesses. Victoria wore her best dress, a simple gown of pale green cotton that she had sewn herself, and Nathan wore a new shirt and had even trimmed his hair for the occasion. When the Reverend asked her to speak her vows, Victoria's voice trembled but did not fail. "I, Victoria Jane Hartwell, take you, Nathan Cordell, to be my lawfully wedded husband." Nathan's eyes never left her face, and when it was his turn, he spoke his vows with a conviction that made her believe every word. Afterward, they had a simple celebration at the ranch. Tom had brought his fiddle, and Pete surprised everyone by producing a cake his sister in town had baked as a wedding gift. They ate and drank and even danced a little in the yard, with Tom playing lively tunes and Nathan spinning Victoria around until she was breathless and laughing. When the ranch hands finally left and the sun had set, Nathan and Victoria stood together in the main room of the house, suddenly shy with each other despite the easy companionship they had built over the past week. "I know this is all very new," Nathan said quietly, "and I do not want to rush you into anything you are not ready for. We can take our time getting to know each other." Victoria appreciated his consideration, but she had made her decision when she boarded that train in Boston. She had chosen this life, chosen this man, and she was not going to hold back now out of fear. "I am ready," she said, and though the words came out imperfectly, they were true. Nathan smiled and offered her his hand. She took it, and together they climbed the stairs to begin their life as husband and wife. The weeks that followed were a revelation to Victoria. Every evening, Nathan made it a point to sit with her on the porch or at the kitchen table and simply talk. He asked her about everything: her childhood, her dreams, her favorite foods, her opinions on the books he loaned her from his small library. At first, she answered hesitantly, still self-conscious about her lisp, still waiting for him to lose patience with her slow, careful speech. But Nathan never showed the slightest hint of impatience. He listened intently to every word, his green eyes focused on her face, and he responded thoughtfully to everything she said. Gradually, Victoria found herself speaking more freely, her sentences growing longer and more complex as her confidence grew. "Tell me about your mother," Nathan said one evening as they sat watching the stars come out. "What was she like?" Victoria smiled at the memory. "She wat kind," she said, "and patient. When the other children made fun of me, she would tell me that I wat perfect just the way I wat. She tied that my voith wat uniqueth, that it made me th pethial." "She sounds like a wise woman," Nathan said. "She died when I wat 13, Victoria continued, her voice growing softer. "A fever. After that, my father did not know what to do with me. He sent me to live with my brother and hith wife, but they had their own children, and I wat just in the way, though I went to work at the mill." "That must have been hard," Nathan said, and she could hear the sympathy in his voice. "It wat," Victoria admitted. "But it taught me to be self-reliant, and it led me here, though I thupoth I should be grateful." Nathan reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I am grateful," he said. "Grateful that you took a chance on a stranger in Colorado, grateful that you are here with me now." Victoria squeezed his hand, her heart full. "Though am I," she whispered. As summer turned to autumn, Victoria threw herself into preparing the house for winter. She canned vegetables from the garden, pickled beets and cucumbers, made preserves from the wild berries Nathan showed her how to find in the hills. She sewed curtains for the windows and made quilts to supplement the bedding. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental oven, and Nathan declared it the best he had ever tasted. In turn, Nathan taught her about the ranch. He showed her how to ride, starting with the gentlest mare in his string, a patient old horse named Daisy. Victoria was terrified at first, clinging to the saddle horn as Daisy plodded around the corral, but Nathan walked beside her, one hand on the reins, his voice calm and encouraging. "You are doing great," he said. "See, Daisy loves you already." "I am cared," Victoria admitted, but she was also exhilarated. "I know," Nathan said, "but fear is not always a bad thing. It keeps you careful, keeps you paying attention. The trick is to not let it stop you from living." By the end of September, Victoria was riding Daisy around the ranch with confidence, and Nathan had started teaching her how to work with the cattle. She learned to identify which cows were close to calving, how to spot signs of illness or injury, how to move the herd without spooking them. "You have a good eye," Nathan told her one afternoon as they rode back to the house after checking on the cattle in the north pasture. "And a gentle hand. The animals trust you." Victoria glowed under his praise. For the first time in her life, she felt truly useful, truly needed. She was not just a burden to be tolerated or a source of amusement. She was a partner, an equal. Their conversations grew deeper as the nights grew longer. They talked about their hopes for the future, about the family they wanted to build, about the improvements they wanted to make to the ranch. Nathan had dreams of expanding the horse breeding operation, of developing a reputation for quality stock that would draw buyers from all over the territory. Victoria suggested planting an orchard, fruit trees that would provide fresh apples and pears and cherries in the summers to come. "That ith a wonderful idea," Nathan said enthusiastically. "We could plant them in the spring, along the southern edge of the property where they would get plenty of sun but be protected from the worst of the wind." We could make pyeth and preserveth, Victoria added, her eyes bright with excitement, and maybe even thittier to thell in town. Nathan laughed at her enthusiasm. We will make a businesswoman of you yet. But it was not all work and planning. Nathan also made time for simple pleasures. On Sundays, they would pack a lunch and ride out to one of his favorite spots, a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles. They would spread a blanket and eat and talk, and simply enjoy being together. Nathan would point out different birds and wildflowers, and Victoria would tell him stories from books she had read or memories from her childhood. One Sunday, in early October, as they lay on their backs watching clouds drift across the sky, Nathan turned to her with a serious expression. "Victoria, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said, rolling onto her side to face him. "Are you happy here? Truly happy? Because if you are not, if you are lonely, or if you miss the city, or if this life is not what you hoped for, I want to know. I want to make it right." Victoria was touched by his concern. She reached out and cupped his cheek with her hand. "I am happier than I have ever been," she said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. "You have given me tomething I never thought I would have, a place where I belong. A person who loveth me just as I am." Nathan covered her hand with his own, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. "I do love you," he said. "I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you on that train platform, looking so brave and so scared all at once. And every day since then, I have fallen a little bit more." "I love you too," Victoria said, and the words came out clear and strong with no trace of hesitation. "More than I can say." Nathan pulled her close and kissed her, slow and sweet. And in that moment, with the sun warm on their faces and the mountains standing sentinel around them, Victoria knew she had found her home. Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling in mid-November. Victoria had never seen so much snow, and she stood at the window watching it fall with a sense of wonder. In Boston, snow had meant slushy streets and freezing cold rooms and the constant battle to stay warm and dry. Here, it transformed the landscape into something magical, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Nathan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Beautiful, is it not?" he murmured. "Yes," she agreed, leaning back against his solid warmth. "But ith it always this much?" "Sometimes more," Nathan said cheerfully. "We can get snowed in for days at a time. That is why we spent all that time laying in supplies. We have enough food and firewood to last us through to spring if need be." The idea of being snowed in with Nathan did not sound like a hardship at all to Victoria. In fact, it sounded rather wonderful. As the snow continued to fall, Nathan and Pete and Tom worked to move the cattle to the lower pastures where they would be more sheltered from the worst of the weather. They made sure the barn was well stocked with hay and that the water troughs were kept from freezing. It was hard, cold work, and Nathan would come in at night exhausted and nearly frozen, but he never complained. Victoria made sure there was always hot food waiting for him, stew or soup or roasted meat with potatoes and gravy. She heated water for him to wash in and laid out dry clothes. She learned to tend the fires to keep the house warm, and on particularly cold nights, they would pull the mattress down from the bedroom and sleep in front of the fireplace, wrapped in quilts and in each other's arms. It was during one of those nights, with the wind howling outside and the fire crackling beside them, that Nathan turned to her with a question that made her heart skip. "What do you think about children?" he asked quietly. "I mean, do you want them? I know we have not talked about it much, but I find myself thinking about it more and more, thinking about what it would be like to have a son or daughter, to watch them grow up here on the ranch." Victoria felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "I would love to have children," she said softly. "I uthed to dream about it when I wat younger, but I never thought it would happen. I thought no one would want to marry me, let alone have children with me." Nathan propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with an expression of such tenderness it made her throat tighten. "How could you think that? You are beautiful, intelligent, kind, hardworking. Any man would be lucky to have you as his wife and the mother of his children." "But my Lisp," Victoria protested weakly, "is part of who you are," Nathan finished firmly. "And I love every part of you. Besides, do you really think our children would care if their mother has a Lisp? They will love you unconditionally, just as I do." Tears slipped down Victoria's cheeks, and Nathan wiped them away with gentle fingers. "Do not cry, sweetheart," he murmured. "I am just though happy," Victoria said, laughing through her tears. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." Nathan kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Then let us make a family," he whispered. "Let us fill this house with love and laughter and the sound of children's voices." Spring arrived in a rush of green and gold, and with it came new life to the ranch. The cattle began to calve, and Nathan was busy day and night helping with difficult births and making sure the new calves were healthy and nursing properly. Victoria helped where she could, learning to bottle feed the orphaned calves and doctoring the ones that needed extra care. She also discovered, to her joy and slight nervousness, that she was carrying Nathan's child. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when Doc Harrison from Aurora confirmed it during his monthly visit to check on one of the ranch hands who had broken his arm, Victoria felt a surge of emotions so powerful she could barely contain them. She waited until that evening to tell Nathan. She had prepared his favorite meal, roast chicken with all the trimmings, and after they had eaten and the dishes were washed, she led him out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking. "Nathan," she began, and he must have heard something in her voice because he immediately turned to give her his full attention. "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "Are you all right? You are not sick, are you?" "I am fine," she assured him quickly. "Better than fine, actually. I am going to have a baby." For a moment, Nathan just stared at her as if her words had not quite registered. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every bird within a mile radius. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her back on her feet. "A baby," he breathed, his hands framing her face. "We are going to have a baby. When? How do you feel? Are you sure you are all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you be resting more?" Victoria laughed at his barrage of questions. "The doctor thinks the baby will come in late November or early December, and yes, I am sure I am all right. He tied I am very healthy and throng, and long I take care of myself, everything should be fine." "November or December," Nathan repeated, doing the math in his head. "Our first child will be born before the new year. That is incredible. That is wonderful. That is terrifying." "Are you cared?" Victoria asked, smiling at his reaction. "Absolutely," Nathan admitted. "I have no idea how to be a father. What if I do it wrong? What if I mess up?" "You will not," Victoria said with complete confidence. "You will be a wonderful father, just like you are a wonderful husband. You are kind and patient and loving, and those are the most important things." Nathan pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "We are going to do this together," he said, "every step of the way. You and me, raising our child, building our family." "Together," Victoria agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. The months of Victoria's pregnancy passed in a blur of activity and preparation. Nathan was even more attentive than usual, constantly asking if she needed anything, insisting that she not overwork herself, bringing her wildflowers and little treats from town just to see her smile. He built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving delicate designs into the headboard, and Victoria sewed tiny gowns and blankets until she had enough to outfit triplets. Pete's sister in town, a motherly woman named Alice, took Victoria under her wing, sharing advice and old family remedies for morning sickness and swollen ankles. The wives of some of the neighboring ranchers began to stop by for visits, welcoming Victoria into their small community. For the first time since leaving Boston, Victoria had friends, women who accepted her without question and who did not seem to notice or care about her lisp. As autumn arrived and Victoria's belly grew round with their child, Nathan made sure everything was ready. He arranged for Doc Harrison to come stay at the ranch as her due date approached, setting up a room for him in the bunkhouse. He stocked the house with extra firewood and supplies in case an early winter storm trapped them. He even practiced swaddling a doll that Alice had given them, determined to know what he was doing when the time came. Victoria watched all his preparations with love and amusement. "You are more worrieth than I am," she teased one evening as he checked for the third time that they had enough clean linens ready. "I just want to make sure you have everything you need," Nathan said. "I could not bear it if something went wrong, and it was because I had not prepared properly." Victoria crossed the room and took his hands in hers. "Nothing ith going to go wrong," she said firmly. "We have the best doctor in the territory, we have plenty of thuplieth, and most importantly, we have each other. That ith all we need." Their son was born on a cold December night, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced his healthy lungs to everyone within earshot. Nathan had been by Victoria's side through the long hours of labor, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering words of encouragement and love. When Doc Harrison finally placed the squalling infant in Nathan's arms, the look of wonder and love on his face was something Victoria would treasure forever. "He ith perfect," she whispered, exhausted but elated. "Just like his mother," Nathan said, bringing the baby over so she could see him properly. "Look at him, Victoria. We made this. We made this perfect little person." They named him Nicholas James Cordell, and from the moment he entered their lives, he became the center of their universe. Nathan proved to be just as devoted a father as Victoria had known he would be, rising in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his deep, rumbling voice that seemed to soothe the baby instantly. When Nicholas was 3 weeks old, Victoria carried him out to the porch to enjoy a rare, warm afternoon. She sat in the rocking chair with the baby cradled against her chest, humming softly. Nathan came around the corner of the house, leading a horse he had been working with, and stopped at the sight of them. "That is the picture I want to carry in my mind forever," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My beautiful wife and my son, right here on this porch. This is everything I ever wanted." Victoria smiled up at him. "Come fit with us," she invited, and Nathan tied the horse to the rail and joined her, pulling up a second chair close enough that their shoulders touched. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the mountains in the distance and listening to the sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing, horses nickering, the distant call of a hawk. Nicholas made small snuffling sounds in his sleep, and Victoria felt such a profound sense of contentment that she thought her heart might burst with it. "You remember that first day?" she asked softly. "When you piked me up at the train station?" "I remember thinking you looked terrified," Nathan said with a smile. "I wot," Victoria admitted. "I wot though sure that you would take one look at me and regret your decision. I thought you would discover my lisp and send me back to Boston." Nathan shook his head. "I knew something was different from the start," he confessed. "The way you would not speak, the way you avoided my eyes, but I thought maybe you were just shy, or maybe you had been through something difficult. I never imagined it was because you were afraid of how you sounded. Everyone always made me feel like there was something wrong with me, Victoria said. Like I was less than other people because I could not speak properly, but you never made me feel that way. From the very beginning, you made me feel like I mattered. You do matter, Nathan said intensely. You matter more than anything. You and Nicholas, you are my whole world. I do not care how you sound when you speak, Victoria. I only care what you say, what you think, what you feel. Your voice is one of my favorite sounds, lisp and all, because it is you. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind, the kind that came from overwhelming happiness. I love you, she said. Though much. I love you too, Nathan said, leaning over to kiss her gently, mindful of the sleeping baby between them. Forever. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by hard work and simple joys. Nicholas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's quick smile. When he was 2, Victoria gave birth to their daughter, Violet, a tiny, delicate baby with dark hair and a temperament as sweet as her name suggested. 2 years after that came their second son, Noah, who was as bold and adventurous as Nicholas had been cautious. The ranch prospered under Nathan's careful management and Victoria's tireless work. They expanded the horse breeding operation, and Nathan's reputation for quality stock spread throughout Colorado and beyond. Victoria's orchard flourished, and her preserves and pies became famous in Aurora, with the general store begging her for more than she could supply. Through it all, Nathan continued his nightly ritual of drawing Victoria into conversation. Even after years of marriage, even when they were both exhausted from long days of work and managing 3 active children, he would find time to sit with her and talk. Sometimes it was about practical matters, plans for the ranch or decisions about the children's education. Sometimes it was about deeper things, dreams and fears and the small observations that made up the fabric of their daily lives. And Victoria, who had once thought she would spend her entire life in silence, talked freely. Her lisp never went away, but it ceased to matter. Their children learned to speak from both their parents, and never once seemed to notice that their mother's S sounds were different. When Nicholas started school in town and another child made a comment about the way Victoria talked, Nicholas punched the boy in the nose and declared that his mother had the most beautiful voice in the world. He was suspended for a week, and Nathan lectured him sternly about solving problems with words instead of fists, but Victoria caught the pride in her husband's eyes even as he disciplined their son. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Victoria with a trip to Denver. Pete and Alice agreed to watch the children for a week, and Nathan and Victoria took the train to the city, staying in a real hotel with electric lights and running water. They attended a theater performance and ate in fancy restaurants, and walked hand in hand through the streets like a courting couple. On their last night, as they sat in their hotel room watching the lights of the city sparkle below them, Nathan pulled out a small velvet box. "I have something for you," he said, offering it to her with a slightly nervous smile. Victoria opened the box to find a delicate gold locket on a chain. She opened it and gasped at what she saw inside. On one side was a tiny photograph of Nathan, and on the other, a photograph of their 3 children. "Oh, Nathan," she breathed. "It is beautiful." "Not as beautiful as you," Nathan said, taking the locket and fastening it around her neck. "But I wanted you to have something that would remind you always of how much you are loved. By me, by our children, by everyone whose life you have touched." Victoria turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face. "How did I get so lucky?" she asked. How did I end up with Tomion Ath, wonderful Athew? I am the lucky one, Nathan insisted. I am the one who got to meet a brave woman who stepped off a train in Colorado with nothing but a carpet bag and a heart full of hope. I am the one who got to watch that woman bloom into the most amazing wife and mother I could have imagined. I am the one who gets to fall asleep beside you every night and wake up beside you every morning. I am the luckiest man alive, Victoria, and I thank God every day that you took a chance on me. They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness they had shared on their wedding night. And when Victoria fell asleep in Nathan's arms, she dreamed of the life they had built together, the family they had created, the love that had grown from that first hesitant conversation on a porch in Aurora. More years passed, bringing both joy and sorrow. Pete died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had helped build. Tom got married and started his own place a few miles away, but he remained one of Nathan's closest friends, and their children played together like siblings. Victoria's brother wrote to inform her that their father had passed away, leaving her a small inheritance. She used the money to build a school in Aurora, a place where all children would be welcome, regardless of their circumstances or differences. She volunteered there one day a week, helping children who struggled with reading or writing, and she always made a special point of encouraging the ones who seemed shy or different. Nicholas grew up to take over much of the ranch work, developing an even better eye for horse breeding than his father. Violet showed an unexpected talent for business, taking over the management of Victoria's preserve and baking operation and expanding it into a thriving enterprise. Noah became a veterinarian, the first in the family to attend university, though he returned to Aurora to practice and remained close to his family. Through all of it, through the triumphs and the setbacks, the births and the deaths, the ordinary days and the extraordinary moments, Nathan and Victoria remained each other's constant. They still sat on the porch most evenings, sometimes alone, sometimes surrounded by children and grandchildren, and they still talked. On the evening of their 30th wedding anniversary, as the sun set behind the mountains in a blaze of orange and gold, Nathan took Victoria's hand and smiled at her. 30 years, he said. Can you believe it? It feelth like just yesterday, Victoria said, though her hair was now more gray than brown and lines creased the corners of her eyes. And it feelth like forever, all at the same time. I would do it all again, Nathan said. Every single moment, good and bad, hard and easy. I would choose you every time. Even though I would not talk to you at first, Victoria teased, especially because of that, Nathan said with a grin. It gave me a challenge. I do love a good challenge. You always did like to make me talk, Victoria said, thinking back to all those evenings when he had gently coaxed her out of her silence. You never gave up on me. How could I give up on the best thing that ever happened to me? Nathan asked, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible, Victoria. You gave me love, family, purpose, joy. You gave me everything. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, watching as their oldest grandson chased chickens around the yard while their daughter-in-law laughed and tried to catch him. We gave each other everything, she corrected softly. That ith what a good marriage ith. Both people giving, both people loving, both people building tomething bigger than themselveth. Wise words, Nathan murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. My wise, beautiful, perfect wife. Not perfect, Victoria said with a laugh. I still have my lisp after all. Thank goodness for that, Nathan said. I would not have you any other way. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and the sounds of their family filled the air around them, Victoria reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Colorado expecting nothing more than survival, a place to exist where she would not be mocked or pitied. Instead, she had found a home, a family, a purpose, and a love deeper than anything she had imagined possible. She had found Nathan, the cowboy who had looked past her silence and her lisp to see the woman beneath. The man who had drawn her into conversation night after night, who had made her believe that her voice mattered, that she mattered. The man who had loved her unconditionally from the moment they met, and who continued to love her more with each passing year. She thought about all the evenings they had spent on this porch, talking about everything and nothing, sharing their dreams and fears and the small details of their days. Those conversations had been the foundation of their marriage, the threads that had woven their separate lives into one beautiful tapestry. And now, 30 years later, surrounded by the evidence of their love in the form of children and grandchildren, a thriving ranch, and a community they had helped build, Victoria understood that the greatest gift Nathan had given her was not the life they had created together, wonderful as it was. The greatest gift was that he had given her back her voice, not by fixing her lisp or teaching her to hide it better, but by creating a space where it did not matter, where she could speak freely without fear or shame. He had shown her that her worth was not determined by how she sounded, but by who she was and what she brought to the world. He had loved her enough to listen, really listen, to every word she said, no matter how long it took her to say it. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, his voice breaking into her reverie. Victoria smiled and turned to look at him, this man who had been her husband, her partner, her best friend for 3 decades. "I am thinking about how different my life would be if I had never gotten on that train," she said. "If I had been too scared to take the chance." "I am very glad you did," Nathan said, "because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You are my heart, Victoria. You always have been." "And you are mine," Victoria said, reaching up to cup his weathered cheek. "Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for making me talk, even when I was too afraid. Thank you for loving me." "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done," Nathan said simply, and kissed her as the stars wheeled overhead and the night settled gently around them. They sat together long after the rest of the family had gone to bed, talking softly about the past and the future, about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch, and all the changes they had seen over the years. They talked about everything and nothing, the way they had been doing for 30 years, the way they would continue to do for all the years they had left. And if Victoria's words sometimes came out with that familiar soft lisp, neither of them noticed any more. It was just the sound of her voice, the voice Nathan loved, the voice that had filled his house with warmth and his life with meaning. It was the voice of the woman who had stepped off a train in Aurora, Colorado on a hot July day in 1882, silent and scared and hoping for nothing more than survival. It was the voice of the woman who had found so much more than that, who had found love, family, home, and herself. It was the voice of Victoria Jane Cordell, and it was perfect. In the years that followed their 30th anniversary, Nathan and Victoria settled into a comfortable rhythm, enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. They handed over more and more of the ranch operations to Nicholas, who ran things with the same care and dedication his father had shown. They spent their days working in the garden, playing with their grandchildren, and helping out around the ranch when they felt the urge. But their evenings remained sacred, that time when they would sit together and talk, just the two of them, continuing the conversation that had begun on their first evening together as husband and wife. When Nathan's health began to fail in his late 60s, slowed by a heart that had worked too hard for too many years, Victoria nursed him with the same devotion he had always shown her. She sat by his bedside and read to him from his favorite books. She made his favorite meals and coaxed him to eat when he had no appetite. She held his hand through the pain and the fear, reminding him of all the beautiful years they had shared, all the reasons they had to be grateful. "I am not ready to leave you," Nathan whispered one night, his voice weak but his grip on her hand still strong. "Then do not," Victoria said, though tears streamed down her cheeks. "Stay with me, fight. We still have though much to say to each other." Nathan smiled at that, his green eyes still bright despite his failing body. "We do we not? Even after all these years, I still want to hear what you have to say. I still want to know what you are thinking." "And I still want to tell you," Victoria said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Though you have to get better. You have to." Nathan fought hard, harder than the doctors thought possible, and after weeks of touch and go uncertainty, he began to improve. It was slow and frustrating, and he never quite regained his former strength. But he recovered enough to once again sit on the porch with Victoria and watch the sun set over the mountains. "You gave me a scare," Victoria scolded gently one evening as they sat wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. "I thought I was going to love you." "Not yet," Nathan said, squeezing her hand. "I am not going anywhere until I absolutely have to. I have at least another 10 years of conversations with you planned out, and I intend to see them through." He made it another 12, living to the ripe old age of 78, long enough to see all 3 of his children settled and happy, long enough to hold his great-grandchildren, long enough to celebrate 50 years of marriage to the woman who had changed his life. On their 50th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted 3 days. There was food and music and dancing, stories told and retold, laughter, and a few tears as they all reflected on the legacy Nathan and Victoria had built. On the last night, when the guests had all gone to bed and the house was quiet, Nathan and Victoria slipped out to the porch one final time. The night was warm and clear, the stars brilliant overhead, and as they sat in their familiar chairs, holding hands the way they had done thousands of times before, Nathan turned to her with a contented smile. 50 years, he said. 50 years of loving you, of talking with you, of building a life with you. I am the most blessed man who ever lived." "We are both blessed," Victoria said, her own voice trembling with emotion. "We found each other when neither of us knew what we were looking for. We built something beautiful together." "We did," Nathan agreed. "And do you know what the best part is? Even after 50 years, I still love hearing your voice. I still look forward to our evening talks. You still have the power to surprise me, to make me laugh, to make me think. You are still the most fascinating person I know." "Even with my lisp?" Victoria asked, a teasing note in her voice. "Especially with your lisp," Nathan said firmly. "It is part of you, part of what makes you who you are, and I love every single part of you, Victoria. I always have, and I always will." They talked long into the night, reminiscing about their life together, marveling at how far they had come from that day at the train station when she had been too frightened to speak, and he had been determined to make her talk. They talked about their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the ranch and the town and all the ways the world had changed around them. They talked about their hopes for the future, even knowing that their own future was growing shorter. And when they finally went to bed in the early hours of the morning, they lay in each other's arms the way they had done for 50 years, comfortable and content, and completely in love. Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 months later, with Victoria at his side holding his hand. She was heartbroken, but she took comfort in the fact that they had had 50 wonderful years together, that they had built a legacy of love and family that would endure long after they were both gone. Victoria lived another 8 years after Nathan's death, surrounded by the love of her children and grandchildren. She continued to volunteer at the school she had founded, continued to tend her garden, continued to be an active part of her community. But every evening, she would sit in her rocking chair on the porch, and she would talk quietly to Nathan as if he were sitting beside her in his chair, continuing the conversation they had started so many years before. When her own time came, at the age of 81, her children gathered around her bedside. Nicholas held one hand and Violet held the other, while Noah sat at the foot of the bed, and she looked at each of their faces with such love and pride that they all wept. "Do not cry," she whispered, her voice still carrying that familiar soft lisp even after all these years. "I am going to be with your father again. We have so much to talk about." "We love you, Mama," Violet said through her tears. "You and Papa gave us such a wonderful life. You showed us what real love looks like." "You showed us that too," Victoria said with a smile. "All of you and your children and your children's children. You are our legacy, our greatest achievement. Your father and I were so proud of all of you." "Tell Papa we love him," Nicholas said, his voice breaking. "Tell him we miss him." "I will," Victoria promised. "And I will tell him how well you have all done, how you have taken care of the Ranth and each other. He will be so happy to hear it." As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded her of that first sunset she had watched from this very house, Victoria closed her eyes and took her last breath. Her children sat with her until the stars came out, talking quietly about their parents and the incredible love story that had begun with a silent woman on a train platform, and a cowboy determined to make her speak. They buried her next to Nathan on the hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a headstone that read, "Victoria Jane Cordell, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She found her voice and changed the world." The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down from parent to child, a testament to the life Nathan and Victoria had built together. The story of how they met, of how he had drawn her out of her silence with patience and love, became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and passed down to each new generation. And on summer evenings, when the sun set behind the mountains and the stars began to appear, you could almost imagine two figures sitting on the old porch in rocking chairs, holding hands and talking quietly, continuing a conversation that had begun more than 50 years before and would echo through eternity. A conversation that had started with fear and silence, and had blossomed into a love that transformed two lives and created a legacy that would endure for all time. A conversation between a cowboy and his mail-order bride, between a man who believed in the power of words and a woman who had been afraid to use her voice, between two souls who had found in each other exactly what they had been searching for all along. It was a conversation about love, about acceptance, about finding home in another person. It was a conversation that proved that the smallest differences, the things we think make us unworthy or unlovable, are often the very things that make us most precious to the people who truly see us. And it was a conversation that, in the end, was about the simple truth that Nathan had known from the very beginning, that Victoria's voice, lisp and all, was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard, because it was hers and she was his, and together they had created something extraordinary. The end.